when we rise into the heights to surrender into our divinity and into the unknown, that universal power, and allow and trust that that is the greatness of who we are, and work and operate from the heart, and that's where that energy comes from, then we're unstoppable.
We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers.
I'm so excited and deeply grateful for my guest today. Tanja, thank you so much for your time and welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me, Hannah. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited. I will definitely talk about your book. That is so amazing that you just recently launched it. And before we dive deep into the world of authenticity, spirituality, and so on, I would like to start with reading the story that you posted today because it touched me deeply.
Oh.
So the words that you chose were, we spend so much of our time seeking to perfect our identity and our physicality. Yet we miss the perfect self that lives within our spirituality. The perfection you seek is the nature of your true self. This authentic self is to be realized and operated from, as all the beauty and potential lies in the authentic you. And I would like to, in touch with these words, I would like to talk to you about authenticity and what it means to you to be authentic, and then also how can we find our true authentic self.
Perfect. Well, thank you for reading that. Authenticity is a very big, I think, cornerstone for me personally in my life, and I believe that it's definitely a beautiful journey for all of humanity to take. It's kind of the journey back home, the home of the seat of the soul, where somehow we've all, through the discourse of life and the animation of life and our indoctrines and our programming, we've lost this authenticity. And I always find it quite interesting because, especially in our digital world today, a lot of us are showing up in the digital space or, coming out into the world a little bit more. Yeah, I see a lot of, imitation in the societies and a lot of copycat, and we're all and when I see this, it's a double-sided coin, because I know when people see other people succeeding in certain concepts and ideas or philosophies or ways that they're presenting themselves, they try to mirror this. And often I find that they don't have that success because their authenticity is silenced and it's masked with somebody else's, program or authenticity, if you want to call it, or desire or dream. And me personally, in my own life, my personal greatest journey was finding that authenticity. I always was quite genuine and authentic in my presence, but I was probably silenced in it from fear. Fear to have a different voice, feared to be a little bit different or to speak my own truth for being lashed out at or silenced or hushed. And often I was, in my own experiences, silenced from many other reasons. And in the story, is the divine. It is that spark of light in which created you. So how could you be steered wrong in it? And this is the tragedy of humankind today, I find, because often we go off on our paths, treading in these really thick, deep oceans, often very alone. Sometimes we are pulled underneath the surface, and to climb back up to the surface, it's very difficult because, the weights and the burdens that we're carrying keep us underneath that surface. But I believe that within our own realms of, let's say, challenging events or what we would call suffering, it's essentially that inner voice, that authentic you, screaming and yearning and crying to be witnessed, crying to come up to surface. And, you know, it's about you reaching that hand forward and pulling that part of you back up to surface, allowing that to shine. And it's the greatest service you could do for yourself, because you in service and the authentic you is the illumination, that spark of the divinity that will light that person next to you. It will transmit the light in which you're created in. And often we don't understand the authentic self. And because we don't know the nature of our true self, we push it down into a corner and kind of follow the trend of what's happening because it's already accepted. And when we already know something's accepted, we feel comfortable in that realm. But it's in the cusp of that threshold where we break our comfort zone that the greatest story that lives within you will start to be told. And you are the the narrator of this story. And when you're in your true authentic self, that story is, it's the most profound power that you're going to be speaking from. That power that we seek, not materialistic, obviously, but that power to transcend, to alchemize, to manifest, to be the best version of self, to be the happiest, to be the most joyful, the most peaceful. It lies within the true self. And that was my journey through my sickness when I became very ill with multiple diseases and ailment, and sought refuge in the exterior world, and in the mercy of every single opinion that I could find, literally throwing myself into everybody's arms to find salvage. I began to realize that these were temporary band-aids, and that the biggest wound was still bleeding inside of me. And it was that inner child, the untainted, that pure, innocent part of us, of myself, was really trying to come out. And until I recognized it, accepted it, and put that part of myself forward and become vulnerable and surrendered to that part of the journey, it would not, the masks of ailment and disease would just keep showing up until I became that authentic self. And in that authentic self, every healing mechanism that we are embodied with, the power to heal, the power to transcend and alchemize, it was all within. And I healed instantly, like very rapidly. And from that point on, it doesn't become a journey anymore of surviving. We're surviving our habits. We're surviving our self-doubt. We're surviving our lack of knowing, when we're surviving our ignorance, really. And this is very much penetrating the impact that we have in our day-to-day life, and it's keeping us suspended in a very low energy and frequency. So when we make space to silence and to allow that part of us to rise to surface, and work and operate from that voice, to be governed by our higher self, to be governed by something greater than self, to be governed by the universal wisdom and power that lives within us, because we are that spark of the universe. It's what we're created from. That unknown, that silent voice within us, that silent or the faceless presence within us. This is the most powerful presence. And when we bring this forward, the capacity and the potential that we live is beyond anything that the mind can even capacitate, because the mind is still limited in a restricted belief system. So when we rise into the heights to surrender into our divinity and into the unknown, that universal power, and allow and trust that that is the greatness of who we are, and work and operate from the heart, that's where that energy comes from, then we're unstoppable, and we are the most profound source of power that exists, which is love.
That was so beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing. And I can agree 100%. It's like, it's really like a journey back to yourself. It's as if we're born as like the perfect creatures that we are. And over time, we just unlearn it. And I feel like growing up is a big part of like finding back to who we actually really are. And the more we embrace our authentic selves, even our quirks and like our, if you so want to call it, like flaws or weaknesses, like that's what makes us unique. And I think the more we embrace it, the more people like can really feel us, and the more like I feel the more the depth of connections that you have to other people, like it just gets deeper and deeper, and you feel so loved when you show yourself in the weakest moments just as you are. And then if people still like are there for you, support you, like that's to be true love. And I feel for that we need this vulnerability and to really see and feel our wounds. So thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely.
You call this process like unveiling, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So how would you say, like, if somebody like you years ago, like being sick or maybe suffering, no matter if it's like a physical disease or something mental, like anxiety, panic attacks, depression, like how can we find back to our essence, our true core?
I think everybody has a different journey back home to that perfected seed of life that we originate from. And that's what makes us unique. And that's what makes the whole, you know, existence and the story of life very beautiful. It's when we can recognize and move past, the material lives that we live and really search and seek to discern our true origin and our true nature. I think the first and foremost is the desire. The desire is what propels the will to take on a journey to find sustenance and substance in life. And when we activate through our desire, it's pretty interesting because a lot of the spiritual community or the commercial spirituality, we often see these really big checklists of what we need to be doing in the spiritual world, and we need to be very quiet for so many hours a day, and we have to be this certain way. And the thing is we're already spiritual. We are spirit. What we need to do is unwind and unfold the densities and the barricades that have been kind of blocking the spirit to shine through. So essentially, it's returning to who you already are. And the fact that you are aware, just by being aware that you're more than the body, that you're more than the mind, and that you're a temple, a vessel for a very profound spiritual light. And when we get out of our own way and when we treat our bodies with kindness, when our mind animated conduits of this story, fragmented in our own unique journeys, here to shed light to each other, the journey of life becomes less daunting, because life in general is always testing us, and our relationships are the catalyst for our growth. And when we can start to rise into higher states of consciousness, to an awareness that we are more than the body, and start to see life saying, for an example, this is how I did it and what worked for me. When I became aware that I was more than a body and that I had not been living my life in a kind manner to myself necessarily, and I was pretty kind to myself, but I still had, you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough, you're not this enough, all, we all tend to do this. When I stopped that dialogue with myself and I started to look at what the universe was telling me, because I dialed in and I said, okay, I'm ready to learn. I am ready for better. I am ready to be the best version of myself. This is not working out. And my body and my mind are suffering. And it's because I'm being called to rise. And when we recognize that and have the courage and strength to stand in our truth, knowing that the very truth that you're standing in is not here to abolish you, to judge you, it is here to liberate you, to break down the confinements of which you were living. And when you can rise to that, you start to see there's a different dynamic that starts to happen, especially in the relationships around you, when you can look into the relationships and look at that person in front of you and say, okay, you're a mirror for me right now. This retaliation we have is a part of me still being reflected that hasn't healed. It's a wound that keeps coming up, and you're the catalyst who's gifting me this moment to see. And when we can see that, we drop down our boundaries with our relationships and that resistance and that, fight for flight mode, and we work with it. We mend to it. As long as, we can contain ourselves, we're non-reactive. We're 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 discerning as opposed to reacting all the time. And this is the first part of falling back into that momentum of love with self, because you're taking everything in life as a gift, even if it's hard and challenging. I've lived a very challenging life myself in terms of suffering, and I know that it's not easy to receive suffering with open arms and say, okay, well, what am I learning today? I understand that. But it's part of the process to liberate yourself from consuming and digesting these moments and taking them on as parts of you that will begin to break you down, essentially. And the return home is definitely a desire to do so. And then, what are you willing to give up in your life to change what has been happening? What do you know I've had people along the way who are like, oh, I want to learn how to rise in consciousness. I want to learn how to automate, like writing. I want to learn how to be more creative. These are all aspects of higher consciousness. But I'm often discipline is only needed when you're not devoted enough to something, because you have to train your mind to do something. For me, everything I do is a devotion, because I'm absolutely in love with the authentic life that I live and the authenticity that comes through me, because it's teaching me all the time. And my authentic self, my soul, is my guru. It is the holy sacred doctrine. The sacred doctrine lives within every seed of life, and until you activate it by desiring it, then it's not going to be recognized. And the thing is we're constantly seeking and searching fulfillment to fill the void of the disconnect that we have. We just don't know that that's the void. So we're constantly fulfilling these voids with ill-minded practices or unserving practices, unknowing that the very essence that you're looking for to potentialize yourself to the fullest and maximum is by turning inward. It is by allowing that authentic self to shine through. Some of the biggest things I'll ask right away: what are you eating and what are you thinking? And these two are very linked. And I'm not saying that we have to be vegan and all of this type of thing, but if you're eating a lot of dead food and packaged foods, that's going to create a chemical imbalance in your system, which will create a chemical process in your mind that creates the negative thought processes. These are very linked, and vice versa. If you're constantly thinking bad, we'll turn to alcohol, drugs, pharmaceuticals, food to soothe our pain. So if we can get a hold of what we're putting into ourselves and understand that the vessel is the sacred temple, and if you keep your vessel clean, mind and body, as pure as possible, then the spirituality that you're seeking just illuminates through you. It's not something you have to go and chase, because you are spiritual. So all you're doing is allowing the vessel to illuminate and to embody what already is, and that becomes your anchor, the light in which you work from. So that's often where I will start. It's definitely where I started. And what's your environment? Who are your people? Or who are you staying around? Is it negative? Is it positive? Are you in nature? Nature is your essence. So if we're tuning into nature and we're putting our feet into the soil, we're touching trees, we're embracing the rays of the sun, and we're drinking pure water. These things are electric. You're an electric light being. So all you're doing is amplifying this electricity. which is essentially your light, which is your radiance, which is your authentic self. So that's kind of where I always start. And, the breath, the biggest question I've had since I was a little child is, what is the breath? Where's the breath coming from? Who is my breath? Where's my thought coming from? Who's speaking in my mind? And most of the time we don't ask these questions. We're not asking them enough. And when you start to realize that the breath, first there was light and then the breath, and it's just like, well, there you go. I mean, the answers have always been written in the stars, but we haven't been utilizing them. So follow your breath, and we don't have to hyperventilate our breath, even though sometimes it could help clear out stagnant energy. But the breath in general, as you know, as a yogi, like it can carry you into the seat of your soul through the intention. Into yoga, our breath, and meditation and nature, for an example. This is where we get to hear ourselves and we get to rise in that resonance, which we can operate from in a more intellectual, heart-filled way, which will definitely guide us along the right path.
I read that journaling was also a big part of like your healing path. And for me, journaling is also, it's just so powerful. No matter if you want to just get your emotions sorted, if you want to get your thoughts on paper, if you want to manifest and like figure out what you actually want. I feel like journaling is such a powerful tool. So would you want to share more about your journaling practices, how it helped you? And maybe even if somebody is listening or watching, like what that person could do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, every now and then when it feels intuitively right, to have certain journaling practices to help them to find back home.
Sure. Journaling is an exquisite tool, because I always kind of refer to journaling as a place where I can communicate with myself, for myself. And it's a sacred place because no one's there to judge you. There's no one reading your work, and it's just you and self. Often sometimes when people go into journaling, they go in with their heads, their mind starts to, but I have to write this way. And if this is silly, I'm not going to write. And this is not the right way to journal. Journaling is just pick up a pen and whatever comes through, just start writing, no matter how silly it sounds, because you're going to actually start to see a part of you speaking to you. You're going to start to see a revelation happening. Part of your buried truth will start to come out. And it might come out in a story, it might come out in a theory or a philosophy. And if we have a heart to the higher consciousness, and that But in the story, I'll see a part of myself in that story, and there will be a golden key that I've been needing along my journey. So most of the time at night as well, part of my journaling process is if I'm stuck on something and I'm trying to figure out something, let's say for writing or for my storytelling, I'll write on a piece of paper something I'm trying to figure out, and I'll ask for guidance and blessings from the unseen world or from my angels or guides, and I'll write it underneath my pillow and I'll sleep on it. And, all the time, within a couple of days, the answer will come through. And it usually happen through my writing experiences. And I'll be like, oh my goodness, there it is. Thank you. And I'll laugh because I'm constantly, it feels like a game to me because I'm like, okay, I need my golden key, in a couple of days. I'm on a timeline for my writing and it'll come. So often, if we actually intentionalize what we're trying to unveil about ourselves, not necessarily in the moment of writing, but in general, in our meditation or our communion with ourselves in prayer, will be guided in these journal sessions, and you'll see some of these golden keys come out for you to utilize to cultivate a deeper understanding of self and how to navigate life in this existence. So another thing I do with journaling, which is extraordinarily important, I will always tune into music. Music for me is a carrier. It is a note that I fly with into my higher states of consciousness. And music is very specific. It has to be, most of the time, it's classical or a strong solfeggio frequency. Some of the great artists in Europe that have blessed us with their harmonies of the divine. And that's kind of where I'll go in my journaling. I'll light a candle. Around the candle, I will set an intention. Sometimes on my candle, I'll write something and let that burn into, the abyss. I'll have incense. And most of the time, at first, I started with like a desire, like, oh, I need to do this, or I want to learn. I want. And now I take 3 deep breaths. I call in my guides and, my angels, and I will say, I surrender to this process. Whatever needs to be emanated or illuminated, let it come through me. I'm a vessel, I'm a conduit. You can speak through me or work through me, and I'm here to service my higher self. And that's that. And you surrender the process and you just kind of let it go, and it takes the pressure off of what we're doing, and there's a natural flow.
Absolutely. And that I feel like experiencing this is always one of these, like it's just those small moments where often you're like at home just in your sweatpants or something, but those are the moments where you just feel so like safe and protected and connected. And I feel those are such precious, wonderful moments.
I agree.
You talk a lot about divine guidance, and I believe in it deeply too. And I align my life always with the guidance that I receive. So I would like to talk about that and ask you, like, how do you feel that you're guided versus like your ego coming in? And how can we all, or somebody like maybe listening who's right now starting to get into spirituality, how can that person learn to feel like, okay, this is the universe sending me right now a message or an angel or whatever you want to believe in. And this is like the path that I am supposed to go on versus this is just something my ego wants right now, and that is actually not meant for me.
You'll notice the difference. Well, first, falling into a place of the heart and residing in a softer space within will carry you through a journey of, ultimately aligning with the divine. And the desire is the main aspect. It's the knocking on the door. It's the knocking on the door to the divine. Sometimes we don't know how we're going to get there. I didn't know how I was going to get there. But when I knocked on that door and I said, okay, I am ready for divine guidance. I am ready to understand myself, my place in life. I am ready to unveil that richness within me because I'm here to live my full potential. I don't know what any of it looks like. I don't even know what my purpose let's say in work looks like, but just I'm here. And when we do that, you've already knocked on the door. You've already started the process. This is something that's universally unseen, and the great mysteries of this universe that sometimes we don't know and we have to trust. But there's a very fine definition between an egocentric experience and a heart-filled spiritual experience. And you'll know when you're in your heart and in the spirit, when so even right now I have it, when your heart literally smiles, where you have this childlike giddiness, joy, where you kind of like want to squeal because you know something feels so right in you, and you're so excited that it's unpenetrable. Like the ego can't infiltrate that, because in your heart, you know, and every part of your physical existence is reaping with this illumination. When you're in the ego, you're doubting yourself right away. This is the quickest classification of ego or heart-filled experience. When you're questioning yourself and it's like, oh no, this is not going to work, or when you start to associate power, money, fame, recognition around something that you're doing, this is egocentric. But when you're in your heart and in spirit, none of that matters, because you know that it's going to be taken care of. Somehow your purpose in that moment, or whatever divine inspiration has come in, you just trust it. It's a surrender. There's so much trust around it that you don't even question anything, because the desire to fulfill that, because the heart knows it's true, the heart knows it's your path, will supersede every other egoic, thought frame that can come in or penetrate that. So that's how I know right away. And it's instantaneous for me. As soon as my mind starts to ramble, I'm like, no, go back and meditate, breathe it out, come back to it, leave it alone, don't harp on it, and it'll come back when it's ready to come back. And as opposed to like pushing and pushing, you're like, okay, I'm in my heart space. I can connect to my spirit. That's not spirit. That's going to be an ego conversation. And sometimes we don't have to be sitting in meditation in silence or on a Tibetan mountain, to come into this. This happens in a walk in nature. This happens when you're swimming in the ocean. It can happen when you're singing a song to yourself, and all of a sudden this divine inspiration washes over you, and it's just you're enlivened with this embodiment of this beautiful feeling, and it's transcendent. It alchemizes everything else around you.
And I feel like everything in life, it's also like just something you got to train and practice. Like I remember years ago, like I had these for the first time, these like glimpses and insights where I just knew like this was right and I need to do this, even though it didn't make sense. And
Yeah.
now it's already for me oh yeah, right. And I like lean deeper into it because now I already know. And like the more I practice it, the more I act according to it. I feel like intuition is also this subtle thing, like the more you act on these intuitive insights, the more they will come and the more they will show up, because it trusts that you are acting according it, and it's like the message is being received. And so I feel like it's also just like training it more and more and like acting upon it. I feel like that's also very, very important thing.
And nothing can happen without the action. So you're 100% accurate on that. It's definitely leaning into it and trusting it. Initiated into the next process of your unfolding. Another layer will unfold. And because you've leaned into it, because you've surrendered to your truth, you have now opened up a new door in the kingdom, within.
You always find such beautiful words, and you also wrote them down in your book, The Golden Virtue. First of all, congratulations to
Thank
that.
you.
That is so incredible. So I would like to talk about the book. Like, what can the reader expect, and what is the book about?
So the book, it's a unique write, I have to say, because it's a story-driven kind of memoir. It's a little bit creative because I didn't want to get so intense on it. I just wanted to open up a little bit of a journey and a perspective for that inward pilgrimage and what it looks like from suffering into the light. And there's poetry in there. There's a lot of dream analysis, our dream world, our imaginations, some divine prophecy in the end, which I have worked with. I mean, I'm guided a lot in some of the prophetic work, but I kept it pretty light and very broad, if you want to call it. Although some people don't say it's quite light, they actually say it's quite heavy in some of the knowledge. But I made it very extensive, so it's not a self-help book. It's not a do this, do that. It's a journey that you're taking with the protagonist, which is Yazabel. And through there, she will bring you on the journey of how she starts to unfold into her own divinity. And it's not a direct do this, do that, but it's a book that when you read it, wherever you are in your journey or consciousness, parts of it will come out towards you. That's going to meet you where you are. So there's something for everybody in the book for wherever you are in the journey. And sometimes, from what I've been told, some parts are not, digestible just yet, and some parts are a lot more digestible. And that's kind of how it was written. It's kind of for everybody in a gentle way, but it opens up doors to all aspects of healing, from learning how to utilize the breath, meditation work, dream analysis, imagination, obviously being in the act of doing. Once you receive these divine guidances, are you acting upon it? Are you trusting the journey? There's some like cacao ceremonies, how we can work with nature, the relevance of nature in our lives, and how the nature outside reflects the nature in us and the return home, and how our children are sometimes these beautiful mediators of that divine guidance because they're pure and they're untainted, and sometimes we often override or overlook their words of wisdom. The dynamics in relationships, the communion and the integration of the divine feminine and the masculine through a marriage and how that looks. So there's a lot of aspects of everything, and it's a creative right. I guess I've been told at one point that it's a new way of writing, I guess, new age storytelling. I think that's what was said at one point. So I don't know if that was positive or negative, but I'll take it as a positive. So it's a book that, you can find whatever serves you in that. And it's not it's not a preaching book necessarily, it's somewhere where you meet the book where you're at.
Which I feel is very, very needed because let's be honest, we all know what to do. Like we all know, like we should, like, eat all the fruits and vegetables, meditate daily, be out in nature, da 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 da. And it's more like a thing of like transforming to the person who does whatever is our highest
Yes.
behavior. And we learn through storytelling. Like we've done this like back when we sat around the fire, and storytelling can be sometimes so much more powerful than just a list of 10 habits that we should include in our life. So I feel that book is really something that was very needed. And for everybody who would like to purchase it or get more in touch with you, where can we find you?
I live on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and I have my website, tanya.m.subotic.com. And the book is on sale on pretty much everywhere: Amazon, Kobo, Barnes and Noble. There's an ebook out. Who I had this incredible vocalist, award-winning vocalist. So she takes you on all the voices, which was pretty interesting. But Hannah, what you said about storytelling, I concur, and that's why I did that, because back to the original way of transmitting wisdom and knowledge, it was always through story, and it's a less invasive way, and it's more inviting and fun. So you're learning without this pressure, and you take what you need. So I really love that you said that. That was the initial intent.
So amazing, so beautiful. I will link everything in the show notes so people can in touch with you, people get your book. And to you, a big, big thank you for being here, for sharing your story, your wisdom. You really, like, I find the words that you choose are so precious and make you really think and see and think a little bit outside the box of what the current, let's say, social media spirituality is. And I feel like that is very needed. So thank you so much for you being. Thank you for your time here, and keep shining your light.
Thank you, Hannah. Likewise. Thank you for holding space for me. You're a beautiful soul yourself. Thank you. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would love to connect with you on a more personal level on Instagram at Empowering Vibes, where you will receive daily inspiration and more insights on how you can turn your dreams into reality. If you want to dive even deeper into becoming your best self and you would like my support, check out my website, empoweringvibes.com. Be sure to subscribe to Empowering Vibes so you don't miss a single episode. And if you like the show, share it with someone who's looking to live an extraordinary life. Thank you so much for being part of this beautiful community. I'm sending you so much love and a big, big hug. And never forget to shine your light.